I found this in his jacket, the hotel receipt.
You don't understand what you're looking
Then
at.
tell her why her name isn't on it.
Odalys, listen to me.
Then why are you afraid?
I was folding my mother's laundry when a piece of paper fell out of a jacket that wasn't ours. A hotel receipt, one name on it, a name that didn't belong to the woman he called his wife. I didn't know it yet, but that little slip of paper was about to burn down an empire and rebuild my whole life from the ashes. If you love stories about hidden secrets, revenge, and karma finally catching up, hit subscribe, because this story is about to get personal. My name is Nadira Voss, and before all of this happened, I was nobody's headline. I was just a girl who grew up watching wealth from the outside, pressing my fingertips against glass I was never meant to touch. My mother's name is Consuela, and for 15 years she has cleaned the floors, folded the linens, and kept the secrets of a family whose last name meant something in this city, the Kessings. I grew up in the small apartment above the laundromat on Faro Street, where the pipes groaned every night like they were tired too, tired of holding up a life that never quite had enough room to breathe. My mother worked so I could study. I worked part-time at the university library so she could rest, even just a little. We had a rhythm, the two of us. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and it was honest. On weekends, when the Kessing house needed extra hands for one of their glittering events, I would go with her. I learned early how to be invisible in a room full of important people, how to carry a tray without being seen, how to smile without being noticed, how to disappear into the wallpaper of someone else's beautiful life. Halvard Kessing was the kind of man magazines loved, charming on camera, generous in interviews, always photographed with his arm around his wife, Odalys, like the picture of a marriage everyone wished they had. I used to believe it too. I used to think people that polished on the outside had nothing to hide on the inside. My mother knew better. She used to say it to me quietly, almost like a warning passed down through generations of women who worked in houses that weren't theirs. Rich houses have the cleanest floors and the dirtiest secrets. I thought she was just tired, just a little bitter after years of scrubbing marble for people who barely looked at her twice. I didn't understand yet that she wasn't being bitter, she was being honest. I remember one particular morning watching Halvard walk past my mother in the hallway without so much as a glance, and yet expecting her gratitude like it was owed to him simply for existing in his world. I felt something twist quietly in my chest that day, something I couldn't name yet. I had no idea that feeling was about to have a name, a face, and a hotel receipt attached to it. I had no idea that my quiet, careful life was about to collide with a truth so big it would change not just my future, but theirs too. It was a Saturday when everything started to shift, though I didn't know it yet. My mother asked me to send Halvard's jacket out for dry cleaning, the same way she'd done a dozen times before without a second thought. I checked the pockets out of habit, the way she trained me to, because forgetting a receipt or a pen in someone's coat was the kind of small mistake that could cost a person their job in that house. My fingers found a folded piece of paper tucked deep in the inside pocket, and I almost didn't even look at it. Almost. It was a hotel receipt, a suite booked 2 nights earlier under a name that wasn't his. At the bottom, in handwriting that clearly wasn't part of the printed slip, someone had written a woman's name, Priella. I stood there holding that piece of paper longer than I should have, my heart doing something strange and heavy in my chest. Every instinct in me said to fold it back up, slide it into that pocket, and pretend my hands had never touched it. That would have been the safe thing, the invisible thing. But something about the way Halvard had walked past my mother that same morning, like her existence was simply background noise in his important life, made my hands refuse to move. I didn't tell anyone right away. Instead, I searched the name quietly, late at night, my phone glowing in the dark like a secret of its own. Priella Danes, a marketing consultant tied to his company, photographed a little too close to him at one too many events, if you looked carefully enough. And I did look carefully. I looked until my stomach turned. My mother noticed something was wrong with me before I said a word. When I finally told her, her face didn't show shock, it showed fear. She grabbed my hands and told me to forget what I saw, that people like us didn't survive the storms of people like them. I understood her fear. I just couldn't make myself agree with it. Around the same time, I noticed Odalis changing too. She grew quieter, sharper, watching the staff a little too closely, reviewing security footage like she already sensed something was rotting beneath her perfect marriage. The air in that house started to feel different, heavier, like a storm deciding exactly where it wanted to land. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was holding his jacket in my hands when Halvard looked up and caught my eyes for just a second too long. And in that second, I knew he saw it. He saw that I knew. He found me alone in the laundry room 2 days later, and I remember the way his voice dropped low, almost gentle, which somehow made it more frightening than shouting ever could. He told me that whatever I thought I saw, I needed to forget it. He said my mother had worked 15 years to build a life for us, and it would be a shame, his word, a shame, if all of that disappeared because of a piece of paper I shouldn't have touched. I stood there frozen, understanding for the first time that my silence had just been given a price tag, and that price was my mother's entire life's work. I couldn't carry that weight alone, so I told her everything. I braced myself for her fear again, but this time something different rose in her instead. 15 years, she said, her voice shaking with an anger I had never heard from her before. 15 years of scrubbing his floors, missing my school events, raising me alone while he built his empire on her exhaustion. And he thought a threat would keep her quiet? I watched my mother stand a little taller that night, and something in me stood taller with her. Everything broke open when Odalis found an earring in the guest suite that didn't belong to her. She stormed into his study, and I heard the shouting from the hallway, glass and awards crashing off the shelves, as she demanded the truth he'd been hiding behind that practiced smile of his. He denied it. Of course he denied it. He looked her dead in the eyes and lied. That was the moment I stepped forward. My hands were shaking as I placed the receipt in front of Odalis, watching her entire understanding of her marriage collapse in real time. And then it happened. The sound I will never forget. The sharp, echoing slap of her hand across his face, right there in front of the staff, in front of me. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Halvard's humiliation turned to rage almost instantly, and instead of facing what he'd done, he turned on us. He fired my mother on the spot, right there in front of everyone who had just witnessed his own wife expose him. "Get out of my house," he said. "Both of you." Like 15 years of loyalty meant absolutely nothing to him. I looked at my mother's face in that moment, and I made a silent promise. He was not going to get away with this. I refused to let him rewrite what happened, as if we were the villains in his story. I had photos of the receipt, timestamps, and something I hadn't even told my mother about yet, a voice memo. After his first threat in the laundry room, fear had made me cautious in a way I didn't fully understand until later. I had started recording every conversation with him after that, just in case. That night, I sat with all of it laid out in front of me, and I made a decision that had nothing to do with money or revenge for its own sake. I sent everything directly to Odalis, not to a tabloid, not to a stranger who would turn our pain into entertainment, but to a woman who deserved the truth in order to protect herself. What happened next moved faster than I ever expected. Odalis, now holding real proof in her hands, brought in the sharpest divorce attorney in the city. It turned out the prenup Halvard had once waved off as just paperwork during their wedding had an infidelity clause buried deep inside it, one he clearly never thought would matter. Suddenly, he was staring down the loss of half of everything, including shares in the very company that had built his name. Priella didn't escape untouched either. Once the affair became public through a leaked internal memo, her position at the company was gone within days. The career she'd built was suddenly attached to a scandal she couldn't outrun, and the whispers followed her everywhere she went. Halvard, desperate to save whatever image he had left, tried to twist the story against my mother, spreading rumors that she had stolen from the house. I remember the fear that gripped me when I heard it, the fear that, after everything, he could still crush us with a lie. But the same security footage Odalis had been quietly reviewing for weeks told a different story. It showed my mother's honesty clearly, and it showed something else too, the pattern of his late-night visitors, the truth he thought he'd buried. The story didn't stay inside those marble walls for long. Local press picked it up, and the billionaire who had built his image on charm and control watched it crumble in headlines he couldn't control. His own board, uneasy about the scandal attached to his name, pressured him to step down as CEO. I didn't feel triumphant watching it unfold. I felt something quieter, heavier, more honest than triumph. I felt the cost of telling the truth, and for the first time in my life, I also felt the strength it had given me. Odalis didn't just walk away from that marriage broken, she walked away transformed. In the weeks that followed, she started a foundation for domestic workers, inspired directly by watching my mother carry herself with quiet dignity through every ugly moment of that scandal. She told me once that in 15 years of living in that house, she had never truly seen my mother until the day everything fell apart, and that realization changed something permanent in her. Then came the moment I still think about more than almost any other. Odalis offered my mother a position that had nothing to do with mops or uniforms. She asked her to become head estate manager, with a real salary, real benefits, and something she had never been given in that house before: genuine respect. On top of that, she quietly covered the remainder of my college tuition, not as charity, but as gratitude for a truth that had cost us everything and given us everything, both at once. Halvard's world, meanwhile, kept unraveling in exactly the way empires built on lies eventually do. He lost his position as CEO, lost half his fortune in the divorce, and eventually lost the mansion that had once made him feel untouchable. I heard, through pieces of gossip that traveled even in circles like ours, that he tried reaching out to Priella after everything settled, expecting maybe some kind of loyalty in return for what they'd both destroyed. She never answered. The woman he betrayed his marriage for wanted nothing to do with a man who no longer had money or power left to offer her. It turns out some people only ever loved what he had, never who he was. I graduated not long after, and I remember the specific afternoon I watched my mother walk back into that same mansion, not with a mop in her hand this time, but with her own set of keys. I stood there for a moment, just watching her. This woman who had spent 15 years being overlooked, now walking through those doors with her head high and her place finally earned instead of assumed. I felt something settle inside me that day, something like peace, something like justice finally catching up to where it always belonged. My mother used to tell me that truth always finds its way to the light. It just takes its time getting there. I used to think staying quiet was what kept us safe. I understand now that silence only ever protects the people doing wrong. If you take one thing from our story, let it be this: never let fear buy your voice. Karma doesn't need your help. It only needs you to stop protecting the people who don't deserve it.